I'd like to introduce tonight's featured speaker, Professor David Denslow. Dr. Denslow is a native Floridian, earned his master's and doctoral degrees from Yale University. He has a very impressive CV. He received a number of awards and honors for his teaching and his services. We don't have time to go through his resume. Briefly, currently, Dr. Denslow, Economic Analysis Program Director in the Bureau of Economic and Business Research and Distinguished Service Professor in the Department of Economics, is best known at the University of Florida as the effective and popular professor of the televised course Basic Macroeconomics. I'm very pleased that Professor Denslow accepted my invitation to speak this evening. He recently visited Istanbul. We look forward to his impressions of Turkey. Dr. Denslow?
Thank you, Professor Timmer. Actually, my wife, Nancy, is supposed to be giving this talk. She can't because she's out of town at a convention, and so I'm substituting for her. Since she is not here, let me be a little bit frank with you and talk about a family crisis that we had maybe 2 years ago. I'm afraid this may sound a little bit like Dr. Phil or like Oprah, something of that sort, but nonetheless, since she's not here, perhaps I can get away with it as long as you'll join me in the conspiracy and not tell her about it. The crisis was where to go for vacation. And she was suggesting that we go to where she had lived when she was in her teen years, when she was 15 and 16, namely Istanbul, Turkey. And I was suggesting that we ought to have the family vacation, our two daughters, Sandy and Sherry and Sandy's husband, Ted. And we ought to spend the 10 days instead in where I lived in my teen years when I was 15 and 16, namely Tampa, Florida. So we agreed that we would discuss that with the family and see, and I made the argument as best I could. It was along the lines of, well, okay, so if you go to Istanbul, you could have a dinner cruise on the Bosphorus, but how in the world could that compare with a spectacular jungle cruise at Busch Gardens? You could maybe go shopping at the Grand Bazaar, but that wouldn't hold a candle to the West Shore Mall. If you have an interest in ancient architecture, you could go see such things as the Hagia Sophia, the Blue Mosque, the Cora, that were built centuries ago. But don't forget that Tampa has the University of Tampa that was built way back in the 1890s. Or you could, if you wanted to, if you're daring enough, go to the hammam in Sultanahmet and get a massage there in one of the Turkish baths. But gee, how would that compare to getting the massage right there in the waiting room at the Tampa International Airport? So I don't know why it was, but I mean, if you want sheer architectural extravagance, there's the Dolmabahce Palace, of course, in Istanbul, but there's the courthouse in Tampa. If you wanted to see the emeralds, you could go to Topkapi Palace, or alternatively go to Gauss & Sons Jewelers in Tampa. Somehow I lost. And so the group wound up deciding that they were going to go to Istanbul and not spend the 10 days in Tampa. So good sport that I am, I buckled down. I tried to learn a little bit of a Turkish, a couple of words here and there, and got ready for going to the trip there. I learned such things as how to say, you won't understand this, but I'll attempt it anyway, merhaba and teşekkür ederim, that sort of thing, so I could carry on profound conversations in Turkish. Well, okay, so we got there, and I did get an immediate chance to use some of my Turkish and to carry on profound demographic conversations about sociology and demography. I, for example, was able to say Istanbul Büyük. No, my accent is so bad you don't understand that. Istanbul is big. I could even say sort of Istanbul çok büyük, but Istanbul is very big. But I realized that it was so big I was going to have trouble getting around, and I needed to buy a compass. Otherwise, I would become totally lost. So we did go to the Grand Bazaar, and I'm an economist, of course, and I'm ashamed to admit what I did to a poor, honest merchant there, and that is in buying the compass. Here's the compass I bought, and I got this for only 20 euros. No, that's a fantastic deal. This is the actual compass that was used by Ataturk at the Battle of Gallipoli, as he explained to me. I mean, it's worth thousands of dollars, and I can't believe that I, as a sophisticated economist, took such advantage of a poor ignorant merchant. And I'd been interested. I'd read Orhan Pamuk, and I'd read My Name is Red. Some of you maybe are familiar with that. It was about miniature artists and a murder mystery. People debate whether it was a murder mystery or about the meeting of East and West and the tensions of that. But it was really, of course, about miniature artists back in the 1590s, and he was claiming there that the reason that they, in their miniature art, didn't do what the Venetians were doing, some of you have read that, remember that, that they did not have perspective, because if you had perspective, then you might have a dog in the foreground that's bigger than the Sultan in the background. You can never allow that. And that they didn't have shadows because you wanted to see things with the view of Allah, not as the view of human beings, so that's why they didn't have the shadows. And they didn't want to be egotistical like the Westerners, and therefore you didn't have faces that were recognizable. And so that's what they thought. And I went to Istanbul and said, well, now's a chance to resolve that, because I'm an economist. Being an economist, I, of course, look at things purely with materialistic explanations. I said, no, it's not that. It's that Venice got the printing press in 1479, and 1469 actually, and the big artistic explosion there came from 1475 to 1500. And so what happened was they had a printing press, so you had all these unemployed calligraphers. And they had to turn to something, so they turned to art. Whereas with the Arabic script, you didn't get all these unemployed calligraphers, and so they were just happy going along with their normal way. And you know that Venice borrowed an awful lot from Turkey. I mean, you look at the things, they borrowed their glass technology. The Turks were way ahead in that. In textiles and making silks and damask and all of those things, Turkey was far ahead of that. In the pottery and the inlaid metals, every other cultural phenomenon. So it was really a bit of a puzzle that I wanted to explore. And luckily the bazaar helped me out too. I asked one of the merchants there if he had any drawings, any miniatures from the workshop of Master Osman back in the 1590s. And luckily for me he did, and he parted with them to me for only 200 euros. I don't know how that Roman printing got on the back of them, but nonetheless it was a good deal. So we got there and we managed to do the usual things that one does there, and it was just absolutely a beautiful time. And I did manage to figure out the puzzle of the miniatures and what was happening there, and that was actually while visiting Topkapı Palace. We'd been to a museum, we'd seen the Rodin sculptures they had there, and then after that we go to Topkapı Palace, and there I finally understood. And that was when I saw the harem. And so what I realized there was you had people who had 112 children. And this was, impossible though it is to believe, they actually raised these children before television, before TV. You had to have some way to amuse these children, and so what they did was the miniatures were collected in books for that purpose, and for the young men they had the battle scenes, and for the young women they had all the love stories. And so in that case, who really cares about perspective and shadows and personal looks and that sort of stuff? Well, okay, this began with a family crisis that I was telling you about, and we had another. It was not when I went to the hammam in Sultanahmet and had a near-death experience, which fortunately somebody revived me by bringing in some ice-cold water, while the person who was giving the massage was just wondering at the amazing ignorance of this individual and saying, Allah, Allah. But in any event, our second family crisis occurred because we had such a good time there, especially going in the offbeat places. I mean, it was fun going to the fancy restaurants and going along, what do you call it, Ishtaklal Kadesi. But it was the places that were off to the side where people were playing the local music and they were dancing to it, and my daughters got into that, and people there were friendly and taught them how to dance, and the music was played with such gusto and such vigor and such love that when the time came to leave, our younger daughter, Sherry, informed us that we could go, but she was staying. So finally we did avert that crisis, getting her to leave with us and come back to the U.S. On the promise that we'll go back again. Thanks.